Hey guys, it's Jordan from Tacoma Lifestyle. Today we have another very exciting install for you guys. We have a K&N cold air intake for the 4th gen Tacoma. We're going to be throwing this in Colby's truck and showing you guys how to install this on your own 4th gen Tacoma. This is going to make this thing sound a lot better and perform a lot better. So let's go ahead and jump into the install. So there are a couple reasons why you might want to consider a K&N cold air intake for the 4th gen Tacoma. Now, something that's new about the 4th gen Tacoma is it's a 2.4 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. And with that turbo, means you get all the cool turbo noises that come with the turbocharged car. Now with the standard air intake on the Tacoma, it works great, but it kind of dulls those noises, and it also doesn't give you as much airflow as you possibly could get if you throw one of these on here. So this is gonna help us actually hear the intake noise of the turbo as well as a couple of the other turbo noises that come with that. And it's also going to let this engine breathe better. So one thing an engine needs, especially a turbocharged one, is air, and this is going to provide a lot of it to that turbocharger. Should be a pretty straightforward install today. K&N provides everything that you need to do this install in your garage all on your own. You got the air filter, got some metal piping for the turbo. You got an Airbox just to separate the cold air from the hot air. You want to keep air as cool as you can with turbochargers, that way you can pack more into it. And then we also have some accessories for that piping right here. Now these clamps that are on these rubber hoses, we've already put them on, but these are going to be off. They're pretty easy to put on. And then we also have one for the air filter. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the old Airbox out of the truck so we can start installing the K&N cold air intake. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is disconnect our mass airflow sensor and also remove it from this Airbox. We are going to be reusing this mass airflow sensor in the K&N cold air intake. You want to be very careful with these. These sensors are very sensitive and they can damage really easy. They're also pretty expensive, so you definitely don't want to damage it. So the first thing we'll do is we'll push down on this clip and then we'll just pull that straight out. Then there's going to be 2 Phillips head screws right here. So just grab a screwdriver and take those out, and then you should be able to just lift this sensor out of place. Remove these 2 screws. And then just lift your mass airflow sensor out. Again, just be very careful with this. It is very sensitive and they're a little bit pricey if you break them. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is grab a ratchet with a deep 10mm socket. I'm gonna use the electric ratchet because I'm lazy, but if you have just a normal ratchet, that will work as well. So we'll just loosen this clamp up and then we will be able to disconnect this hose from the intake of the engine. So once you have this loosened, go ahead and just wiggle this loose, and then you can just lift the whole Airbox out of the car, just like that. So we've actually already put an intake system on this truck before, but if it's your first time doing it, it might be a little bit tricky getting the Airbox off of these posts right here. You're just going to want to lift and kind of pull, and then they'll just pop right off. But that's why if you're having trouble getting the Airbox out, it's just because of those posts, but you can just lift straight up and they'll pop off. All right, the next thing we're gonna wanna do is we're actually gonna remove 2 of those posts. So we're gonna remove this one up by one of the fuse boxes, and then this second one right here. It's on the more inside part of the engine bay. That's gonna be this front one right here. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna start on the air intake side right over here by the engine. We're gonna grab one of our silicone connecting pipes. We're going to attach it to the metal piping for the air intake. And then I snug this down with like either a flathead or an 8mm socket. Either works. And now we're going to just attach it to this opening right here on the engine. And then we'll snug the other side down, same thing with a flathead or an 8mm socket. All right, and once you've snugged that down onto the engine air intake side, you'll want to get that clamp that was on here on this bottom side, and you'll just want to tighten this down. It's really important that you tighten these down because you don't want any air bypassing the air filter and then getting into the engine that way, because especially if you do a lot of off-roading, air is going to be really dusty. You don't want that in your engine, so just make sure that these are all snugged down and they're really tight. So next we're going to take our second silicone connecting pipe. This one's going to be a little bit bigger than the other one. So there is a difference between the two. This one will be bigger. The one that we just put on will be smaller. So if one isn't fitting, that's why. So we're going to take the bigger one. We're going to set it around our intake pipe and just get it snug. Make sure there's no places that air can get in around this. Like I said, you don't want any dirty air getting into your engine through here. So once that is sealed up, go ahead and tighten this clamp down again with an 8mm or a flathead. All right, we're now ready to install our Airbox. Now this thing is going to help separate all of the hot air from the engine with this nice, cooler, clean air coming in through the outside of the engine right here. This is where the engine's going to be taking in air. You don't want it to be hot because these turbochargers do a lot better job at compressing cold air than hot air. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach this part of the intake to this little lip right here on the Airbox, and then we're going to tighten that down and seal it up. All right, the next thing we want to do is bolt down our Airbox. Now there's going to be two places you're going to bolt this down. One up here on the front side, which is going to be where one of those posts were that you removed earlier. It's going to be the one closer to the engine. And then on the back side by the fuse box, there's going to be one right there. You'll have two bolts provided. Just go ahead and hand thread these in, and then you can go and tighten them down later. So depending on where your air intake piping is, it might be a little bit trickier to get the Airbox to fit in those holes. So another thing that you might want to do is you'll have to kind of loosen this and get it into a better position. Or if it's close enough, this does bend a little bit, so you can just kind of bend it into place and then get those holes threaded. It's not going to do anything to the Airbox. The whole point of the Airbox is just to separate warm air from hot air, or warm air from cold air. So once you do that, you got both of these bolted down, we can go ahead and move to installing the air filter. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do before I grab the air filter is I'm going to tighten down these bolts holding this Airbox in. Especially this one is going to be very difficult to get with a massive air filter in the way. So go ahead and just snug these down, and then you can go to installing your Airbox or your air filter. Okay, so here we have our air filter. So the best way to get this in, we found, is you kind of just like pop it down below where it's supposed to go. It's just gonna fit over this lip right here. And then once you get it down, you can kind of angle it and just get it on this bottom part and just pop it right on, just like that. This also has a clamp that you'll want to tighten down. Once we get this clamp tightened down, the whole cold air intake has been installed, and we just need to get the mass airflow sensor back in here, plug it back in, and then we can turn the truck on and see how it sounds. All right, so now we'll want to install our mass airflow sensor. Again, just be very careful with this thing. It's very sensitive, you don't want to break it. It'll kind of go in at an angle and should just slide right in just like that. So K&N provides two 3mm Allen screws that are going to hold this in place. Get them hand threaded before you tighten them down with a 3mm Allen wrench, and then we're good to plug this thing back in and start the truck. Lastly, we'll plug in the mass airflow sensor. You don't want to start the truck before making sure that this is plugged in and working, because it will throw a check engine light. The mass airflow sensor is really important. It's how the truck figures out the proper air-fuel ratio to make sure it's running its most efficient and at its best performance. So it's definitely an important thing that you don't want to mess up or start the truck without. So if your truck does end up throwing a check engine light, there's a couple things you can do. You can drive it around a little bit. It usually takes a little bit of time for a check engine light to go away, especially if you just had this unplugged or started it with it unplugged. Another thing you can do is just reset the ECU, clear any engine codes, and then that should keep the check engine light off, especially if you have this thing installed properly. But if you did it without starting the engine, you should be fine. All right, so we just got the intake installed. We're gonna go ahead and start it now and see how it sounds. Okay, so we've installed the air intake, we've driven it around, sounds significantly better. Before, this engine kind of sounded like a vacuum cleaner, wasn't very loud. If you did want to hear the turbo, you'd really have to get on it, and even then it was super quiet, especially inside the cab. Now with the cold air intake, we can hear all of the awesome turbo noises that make this engine so cool. So I definitely would recommend a K&N cold air intake for any 4th gen Tacoma owner. This is going to go a long way in just improving, one, just the performance of your truck, but just the fun factor as well. Just driving around, getting to listen to all of those awesome turbo noises makes this truck significantly cooler. Thanks again for watching, guys. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any videos like this or any trail videos that we do in the future. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave us a comment and we can go ahead and answer those. Thanks again for watching, guys.